Thanks a lot, JB. Don't expect a fancy speech out of me here today, but because this is one of the first times I've done this in front of a crowd of people, so I'll be looking at my paper a lot and going through this. But basically, I grew up farming beef cattle and making hay. I can remember as a kid always looking forward to May coming around, wanting to make more hay. And as time goes on, I kind of lose interest in making hay because it seems like that year comes around a lot quicker, from one year to the next. And of course, as any young farmer too, always numbers. Everybody says, how many cows you got, how many acres you farm, everybody's into numbers. Well, the older I get, the number that I'm interested in is the profit number at the end. No matter how many cows you have, if you're not making a profit with them, well, then it's not too much. I'm not too interested in doing it anymore. So, but all this has led for me in wanting to stockpile to extend my grazing season. Of course, most of you all, we've talked about it today. Most people realize what stockpiling is now. Removing your livestock from a pasture and or hayfield, or however you want to do it, sometime anywhere from June, July into August, July and August. And sometimes I fertilize with chicken manure or poultry litter, and then going back to the test that JB and us did there a couple years ago, we used nitrogen on part of the 75 acres of pasture that we were doing this test graze on. And why do we use fescue? Well, fescue for wintertime grazing, fescue is the best suitable grass for holding the forage value throughout the year. And I have a chart here later on that will show you part of that. But here's part of the 75 acres that we did 2 years ago, which I guess I've rented this for 5 or 6 years now. It joins 2 other farms that I rent. And probably maybe 8-10 years ago, I always thought it'd be great if I could rent this piece because we always called it a fescue pit because it's just straight, pretty much mostly fescue. And the more I got into wanting to graze year round, I thought this piece would make a good addition. So a couple years later, I was able to rent it, and then I have just been putting 50 or 60 cows on here I like to put them in there January 1, and then just let them go for the rest of the year and then just feed hay as needed when it snows. But then when JB come to me and talked to me about doing the strip grazing, I thought, you know what, that's what I need to be doing, but I've never had enough. I never wanted to, just never wanted to get the initiative to do it because I thought it seemed like a lot of work. And so that year we did this. And, as you can see here, there's a fence line right down through here and coming back through here. So we started here with 10 acres. And this is not an ideal farm at all to be doing this on. I just tell you, it takes more work to move the fence here than it does a lot of places. And there's only one water location way back here on the back end of the farm. So the cows have to do a lot of walking and you have to do a lot of moving fence. But anyway, we fertilized that year in August, and this was one of the years, this was what, 2000, the year 10, the year that a lot of people had to buy hay, and we did not get a lot of growth until we got some rains there in October. So there was only about 4 or 5 weeks of good growing that we had on this farm. And to make a long story short, we ended up getting, I ended up moving the fence on here 26 times and ended up getting to the spring of the year by feeding, I believe it was 16 bales of hay. And last year, this same place had 55 head of cattle on it, and I moved the fence 6 times and did not feed a bale of hay. So we were talking over there at lunch. There's there's no right or wrong way to do strip grazing, in my opinion. I mean, you can have the guys that move the fence twice a day. I've got a group of cows for my mom now. We're moving the fence twice a day if we're around, or we'll just give them a bigger spot if we're not going to be able to move it. So, and as you can see, last year I moved it 6 times, partially because we had a lot more growth in the field, so I wasn't concerned about wasting it as much. But the year that I moved it 26 times, I mean, we feel like we definitely doubled the amount of grazing we got out of that field by doing it that many times. And that was also the year of, if you remember, in our area, Rockingham County, we have the hay auction, and I sold quite a few loads of hay at the hay auction that year for $160 to $199 per ton. So there was quite a bit of profit there from that hay that I was able to, if I doubled my grazing here, I was able to sell some hay. So that worked out real well. A lot of the benefits I see, and this same group of cows, we've been calving them in January, and I want to move that up to, like Jim was talking about this morning, making use of your forage. I'm going to move them up to start calving in September, well, October for sure, and maybe I'll go as far as September. But this year we moved them up one month, from January 8th to December 8th calving, and I calved we started December 8th, and I calved I had 53 calves on the ground out of 60 in the first 21 days. And we've never, I also have some other groups of cows where we do spring calving and stuff, and we've never been able to do anything like that on spring calvers. But so the fall calving for me has worked, is going to work a lot better with this fescue. We're just seeing it in the cows breeding back faster. I saw a cow the other day that she was in heat, and it was 28 days after she calved. And I know earlier we were talking about getting bred back in 83 to 90 days after the calve, but I'm hoping to move them up to starting in November next year to get them up, try to move them up another month. So I was real pleased with being able to do that the first year. I wasn't sure how that was going to go. I didn't want a bunch of calves strung out, but so fortunately it worked out real well. So, and then after doing this on this farm, I'm doing it on. Here's a picture of the first day moving the fence, and the cows. They didn't know the system here yet, but now, I mean, as soon as you go back to that back end, they're all 50 of them are waiting there to go through. So, and since this is a difficult farm to do it on, I use 2 fences. I have the fence here, and then I put a backup fence out in front of them. So yeah, it's more work to have 2 fences there, but I can go here and take this one down and not worry about the cows getting ahead of me. Now, I've got some nice rectangle fields where you can just sit there and move the fence ahead of the cows right in front while they're there eating. So, like I said before, there's many different ways to do it, and you can do it on however it works for your operation. We went too far. Here's a picture they seem to put in every book everywhere anymore. They print up. This is one place just showing. And, I know a lot of people say, well, my cows don't respect polywire. I've got a group of cows now that I'll be honest with you, my mom's cows, the first time we've tried it on them, they have broke through that fence 5 or 6 times now. And I'm just finally getting them to the point where they're starting to respect it. They just don't respect the fence. And what I do is I go out there now when I move the fence, and I'll just push the fence over against them and let it hit a few of them, and then they're starting to realize that fence is hot. Because most people know with polywire, if a calf, they'll go right underneath it. They can go fast enough where it doesn't hit them. And this morning as I was leaving, there was one group there. I have 30 cows, and the cows were all lined up eating. And the 30 calves, believe it, they were all over on the other side of the fence. We call that creep grazing because they were getting the better grass because they'll go underneath it. And so that's the I want to get it to where the calves go underneath it, but the cows won't. So it's a challenge sometimes, but it takes a little time to get them used to it. But the groups that I have used to it, I mean, they just really respect it well. And just one thing, don't let your fencer turn off, because they will find it in a couple of days if your fencer goes bad. This is in 2010. As you can see, there's a good bit of grass there, but it's not near what I have this year. And here's a picture, I believe, for Mike Phillips. He enjoys this, where the cows are getting plenty of good lush pasture, where the manure's not piling up on them. Here's another picture that this is in March 21st. That when the year I moved them 26 times, there's a polywire fence right back here on the back, and you see I had one more section to go into. And by this time, the rest of the 75 acres, I got another picture I'll show you where it's already greened up. So these cows aren't just relying on this stockpile here. They're starting to pick around on the remainder of the 75 acres and getting some utilization out of it. Here you can see where I had moved the fence. So this is definitely still not overgrazed here. You can see there's quite a bit there for them to eat on. This year, these cows calved in January that year, and as you can see, this into March, some of these calves are nice and big already, and the cows were in good flesh. The three things I used that year, of course, is I used the step-in post and a reel, and this wasn't the high-dollar reel. I've since bought some of those better reels, the 3-to-1 ratio that roll up a lot better. And we used a battery and a battery panel that year. So this particular farm, I do not have any electricity on, but still able to do it. I mean, we have some farms where we have electric fences on both sides, and those work extremely well because they're real easy just to tap into your electric fence. But that was another challenge on this farm with no electricity there. Had to make sure that battery stayed hot, because like I told you, there was one time when I didn't realize it and the battery went dead, and there was 10 cows on the other side of the fence. So. Now here we're fast forwarded into this year. Bill was taking these pictures the other day, and this was with that good old, I'd say this is one of the things that as a grazer you don't like to see in December, is a good old heavy wet snow that was 3 or 4 inches, that compacted and stayed around for about 2 weeks. And but as you can see, where the fescue was tall and where it was taller, that the snow melts off a little quicker there, and so you can still get some grazing. Here's another 20 acre field that I have. Actually, I just turned a group of cows into part of that just yesterday. That's not the greatest picture, but here's this is the same field. You can see here, back here is where I was just moving the fence here about 8 feet every day. Back here they grazed the day before. And this group of heifers, there's 30 heifers there. I got the bull running with them, breed them. They have a round bale of hay down in the barn, but during the storm and the 2 weeks after, they never went to the barn to get a bale of hay. And even though the grass was covered up a lot more than it is here now. There's one picture here that Bill got, and can't quite see it here as good, but on the picture here it shows a cow. It looks like she's got her head down in a bucket, and she's actually pushing a big chunk of snow and ice out of the way to get to the grass. A couple years ago I supplemented with some hay and with square bales, and if they have access to grass like this, they're going to eat, most of the time they'll eat that grass over the hay that I gave them. Here's here's an interesting field. I have this is a 35 acres in this little farm here, and I've always just grazed the cows year round. I run 25 cows on it, and they run over the whole 35 acres from, like I say, year round. Back here, you can see this field runs up, and there's about an 8-acre hay field there. So we've always made hay off that 8 acres, and then basically turned around and fed it back to them in the winter. But this year I decided to split it up into 4 pieces, and I just used polywire, used the same amount of cattle, and rotational grazed them. Like I say, I had not done any rotational grazing on this farm before, and but with rotational grazing them, and of course we all know this was a good year, but I was left with about 6 or 8 acres here that hasn't been touched since July, and I just started last week strip grazing that. So, and as you can see, the fence is right down here, and over here on the left, as you can see, there's more snow because the grass is shorter, and this here, the snow melts faster because the grass was taller, and the heat just gets to it quicker. So, but a couple people have been asking me, have I changed my stocking rate? Well, I'm not sure what you really have to do, but on this particular place, I did not change the stocking rate at all. I just, left the same 25 cows, did not make any hay, and as it looks, unless we get a lot more snow this winter, I'll be able to graze all winter long without feeding any hay. And like I say, that's without changing the stocking rates. The only thing I did different was rotational graze. And I wouldn't say I intensively rotational graze. I just kind of, there again, there's so many different ways you can do it. You can be intensive, or you don't have to be quite as intensive. So this is 35 acres, and I was running 25 cows. Now I know a lot of you will say, well, that's only an acre and a half. I think that's an acre and a half per cow. Now I will say that I have a crop field next to this that they graze about in September after I take the crops off. They run in there for about 30 days. So there's an additional few acres but I've done that same thing for 3 or 4 years now. So I didn't do anything different this year. I did the same thing, and still was able to have this much grazing left over. So as far as what he was talking about this morning about the stocking rates, that's another reason why I'm going to fall calving, because with fall calving, you have a lot more animals eating grass in June, July, or in May and June, April, May, and June. When you have the most grass, that's when your cow has a big calf on her. So if you, I found out, rather than trying to buy in and bring more cattle in, because I always thought, well, I'll buy some steers to bring them in the spring to help eat that grass when it's flush. But, if you're doing a fall calving rotation or a fall calving, you have a lot of extra animals there to eat that grass down in April and May, unless you sell your calves off in April. But we usually keep our calves up to 600, 700, 800 pounds. So in April, May, and I've got a lot of grass there, and I got the number of cattle to help eat it down. And then when you get into June, July, and August, when that fescue is not near as good, we pull the calves off, and that cow just doesn't need a lot of nutrition. And so that's why I feel, for me, the fall calving with the fescue just works really well. Here's a nice, this is where I'm doing my mom's cows now, and as you can see, I've got 2 wires here because I knew they had caused trouble in another field, so I thought I'd try that, and that's helped to keep them. But this is a nice, easy rectangle field to move the fence in, but it does have a drawback in that it's a low field, so I started them there about 2 weeks ago, and then we got all that rain, and I just had to pull them out because I didn't want them, they were just tromping the field up too much and wasting too much grass. So, but this is, like I say, this is a real easy fence to move because it's only 100 yards across there. So I think I have 10 posts in this field. So and I have been moving this twice a day. But because it's real close to where I live, and so it's not that hard at all to go out there and move this one. And going to try to keep some real good records on that field this year, because we're just to kind of see how long that lasts them versus if I would have cut the hay. Well, I know it's going to last longer, but if I would have cut the hay and fed it back to them. Here's the hay that back in 2010 we tested my orchard grass hay, and as you can see, it tested 9% crude protein, and the stockpiled fescue tested 13% without nitrogen. With nitrogen, it tested 21%, and that was in November. And you come all the way down here to March 22nd, we didn't have any fescue left with nitrogen, and that was all grazed off, but the stockpiled fescue with no N was testing 10.7%, better than my 9% hay. So, and like I say, that's after quite a few months and that year we had some snow that helps to take the nutrients out of it and everything. So that's you can't argue with that there as far as of making hay. I know you can make better hay than that, but that was some pretty good orchard grass hay there. Here's a feeder that I had out in that field that I never did use last year, because when we put it out there, thought maybe we were going to use it. Never had to use it. And here you can see how the field has a green tint to it. This is the day that I moved them up on top into the last section there. And as you can see, the rest of the acreage has a nice green tint to it, for where the cows are just picking over the whole 75 acres. So we weren't just relying on the stockpiled fescue by then. They were grazing elsewhere. Does anyone have any questions? What was that?
With your polywire, what kind of challenge deer pose?
Oh, deer?
Yeah.
I haven't had a major problem with deer. I did on the one farm where I had two fences, where I put the two fences, the one's not hot, and they have ran into that a few times and knocked it down. But fortunately, they have never run into the one where the cows are at and had any trouble. But I could see where that, on certain farms, that could be an issue. But I do know this, the other day there was 14 deer running through the farm, and I saw them, the first two came and jumped over the fence, and then the smaller ones went under the fence. So once they kind of know it's there, or in the general vicinity, deer learn it, I think. They learn it, and like I say, I was surprised to see them. I thought they were all going to jump it, but they all ended up just going underneath it. So it was interesting.
We've got one more question here, Peter.
When you started doing some of this, did you take soil tests maybe before you started some of your strip grazing? I know you've only been doing a year or two on that.
Yeah, we did. I'm pretty sure. I haven't checked it since then, no. But
What I found when I've been strip grazing like that the nutrients get to the point I was telling these people on fertilizer.
well, I've always, I hesitate to say that in front of a meeting, but I've always thought that probably would be where I would get, because the manure distribution on these farms is just amazing. And this year, and if it works out at all, I think it's really good for maybe 1 year. See, since in the wintertime we're not using a backup fence, they're going to the water trough, and then you just keep going out. But it would be nice if you could to switch your operation for the next year, feed from the opposite way, because you always end up with a little more manure towards where the fields that you start in. So that just manure distribution is a big thing for me, and I don't like bare spots in my field. I really don't like where I put my mineral feeders, because there's always a bare spot. And so if I do have to feed hay, I normally unroll it out in the field, so so when you come out there in the spring of the year in June, you can't see where we fed hay. That's my goal, unless you see some that got wasted and the grass is greener because of the nutrients in the hay. Because I always figure any hay that we unroll, I don't like wasting hay, but anything that's down there, it's fertilizer for the next crop. Here's one.
You always or do you usually sort of skip or do you put out two collie fences
That
to like set up your next when you're back before you turn them in and then sort of
That's what I do on the farm where the fence is hard to move because I can't move it fast enough to keep the cows from getting ahead of me. So I use two fences, yeah. And then, like I say, on a nice rectangle field, I'll just go in there and move it over 10 feet. And you walk to one side, move it over 10 feet, walk back and move it over another 10 feet because usually your wire has enough play in it where you can do that.
Was there one more question over
There's
here?
one back here.
Peter, you had any issues with fescue foot? Like wintertime grazing?
No, sir, not that I know of. I mean, we get some issues in June, July that, we think that's what it's from. We don't know for sure, but we think that's what it's from. But I've never had any in the winter that I know of.
When do you start your stockpile rotation?
Start anywhere from December. I like to put it off as long as I can, but usually in December or sometimes even in January. Like some cows we just started doing now.
Peter, we didn't hear what the question was. What was the question?
Okay, he asked when did I start grazing the stockpile, and then have I ever had trouble with fescue foot in the winter in the cows? And not to my knowledge, I've never had trouble with fescue foot.
What's
It's, I'll leave that up to someone else. I'm not sure. I would just say when a cow's limping.
The fescue foot just has to do with the high levels of the toxin building up in the cattle, and during the winter months, with restricted blood flow, which is one of the symptoms of the effects on the cattle, you can restrict blood flow to the feet, and sometimes they'll lose a hoof, or they'll get lame and so forth. But it's related to that.
To the toxicity,
Yeah. And
which you
effects
don't
on-
see in the wintertime near like the summer, right? I mean, that's
Most
my
of the time,
experience, yeah.
Any more questions as we close? All right, let's thank Peter for sharing.
You want all this?